episode 450 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and listeners, maybe you caught it at the end of episode 448 or episode 449. This is going to be my last episode of Retro Encounter for a while. I'm stepping down from RPG fan management and podcast showrunner duties. So we're gonna use, but the podcast isn't ending, and I'm not permanently leaving. This is a goodbye for now, not a goodbye for good. But we're gonna use this episode to reminisce a little bit and just talk about the podcast itself before I officially pass the torch over to a new showrunner. But This is not a solo episode. I'm still not brave or stupid enough to try doing that. I have three wonderful panelists today, three of the most frequent Retro Encounter guests from over the years, starting with Alana Hagues.
Hello, hello.
Also, Peter Triezenberg.
Hey.
And Zach Wilkerson.
Hello.
Zach, Peter, Alana, I consider each of you a dear friend. I've met all of you in person. We've hung out, we've laughed together, we've talked about video games for so many hours over the years, and I think we wouldn't have met if it weren't for RPG Fan and Retro Encounter. So I'd like to start off this episode with let's say just a bit of an origin story. Peter, you and I were two of the founding members of the podcast back in spring of 2015, and I'm not sure we've told a full version of this story on the air.
No, I don't think so. It's been 9 years now.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So I'll kick off and just talk about the beginnings of the podcast, and if you have a correction or a comment to make, please jump in and do so. And the same thing with you, Zach and Alana. You weren't here in 2015 with us, but you've been there almost as long, and you probably have some thoughts and feelings about how this began. So anyway, this will be from my perspective, but it's the story of Retro Encounter. I started out as a listener of Random Encounter, the first podcast on RPG Fan, and I didn't jump in from episode 1, but I remember being in to Rhythm Encounter by episode 1, and I was a dedicated listener, even sending in emails like complaining about whatever or making small corrections here and there because that's just part of my personality. I'm sorry. As early as like 2011 or 2012, I'm not sure exactly when. I was doing a job where I was basically riding in a truck all day, and my podcast listening output increased by a lot. So I remember in a 2014 or maybe late 2013 episode, they mentioned that a bunch of RPG fan people were going to MagFest that year in early 2014. And I said, wait a second, MagFest, that's the convention I go to every year in Maryland. What's there a bunch of the people I listen to every week are going to be here? That's wild. So I reached out on Twitter, let them know I would be there too, and I met Rob Steinman, Derek Heemsbergen, Mike Salbato, and Steve Meyerink and Caitlin Argyros there. And we had a really nice time. I really enjoyed spending time with all of them. And they encouraged me to, hey, next time we do a hiring drive, if you want to be a part of the website with us, you can just apply. So I did. And in late 2014, there was a large hiring drive where a bunch of sections were being advertised on social media. And it was a lot of people joined it at once then. It was at least 15 new staff members. And I applied for the music section and got in. And Peter, you were an applicant to the news section that same drive.
Yep, yeah, definitely. That was when Andrew was still in charge of the news back then, and I had I had my interview with Kyle. I just started around the same time as you guys, and then we were still writing stories in a forum post back then.
That's right. My interview was with Steve Meyerink, who was the head of music at the time. But a bunch of people joined at that time. The only person from the from that hiring drive that's still with RPG Fan are myself and also Scott, our streamer extraordinaire. He started out in the news section with you, Peter.
Yes, he did,
and he's been on the podcast several times before. But he's our videos and streaming guy, and not necessarily a podcast guy. But like everyone sort of found their own role after years. I mean, I'm sure Scott doesn't miss being a news poster anymore.
Hmm.
But more importantly, in that same hiring drive were four others. There was Jesse Wu and Josh Curry in the news section with you, Peter, and Davey Tesnovich and Marcos Gaspar in the music section with me. So we all joined in the around the same time in October or November of 2014, and I was already interested and angling on being on podcasts because I mean I listened to RPG fan podcasts more than I read reviews. I had ideas for podcasts, but knew that I couldn't just step in and immediately be like a sidekick on random or rhythm. So I had this idea, hey, what if there was an off-topic podcast about any topic that we wanted, and it didn't have to be about music or current events? And I was thinking that each episode would be dedicated to a specific game or something like like a listicle, kind of like our off-topic episodes of Retro Now. But my idea was every episode would have its own topic, but they were more evergreen topics. And I sometime after I joined, I don't know, like a few months after I joined, I floated that idea separately to Rob and Derek, and both of them thought it was a great idea. But I think one of them told me specifically, I don't even remember which one, hey, wait a little while before you pitch that because you just joined. I mean, it's going to be crazy if you join and immediately suggest starting a podcast. And I thought that was reasonable. So I said, all right, over the summer or maybe in the fall, I'll pitch a third RPG fan podcast. But someone beat me to the punch. In I think March or April, Josh, one of the new hires alongside Peter and I, had an idea for a sort of a book club podcast where which resembles modern retro encounter game journals. We would play a game every month and talk about it in multiple episodes that month. And I think we didn't have a lot of structure or ideas. Like some of us wanted 2 episodes a month, some of us wanted 3 episodes a month. We ended up just recording however many we could, and it was not super consistent. But that idea took hold quickly, and a lot of people were interested in joining him on that idea, and that included all 6 people that I mentioned before: Josh, you, Peter, myself, Jesse, Davey, and Marcos. I couldn't record the first episode because I was busy, but I was there from the beginning, and I suggested the name Retro Encounter for the podcast because that was the idea I had for my podcast I wanted to pitch later. So even though I was not the original progenitor of Retro Encounter, the name was my idea from the beginning. We floated other names out there. It was almost RPG Fan Replay. It was almost Replay Encounter or Rewind Encounter, but I think we liked Retro Encounter the most.
Rolls off the tongue pretty well.
Yeah, so I feel confident that we made the right decision there. But so I was not on the first episode, which was sort of an intro, and then episodes 2 through 4 were about Trails in the Sky first chapter, and I didn't sign up for those because I figured, you know what, I just played that game less than a year ago. I'll be on the next one, which is not, I wouldn't have that attitude now, but that's how it was at the time. So my first episode was episode 5 about Final Fantasy X. But Peter, you were on all 4 of those first ones, and I think that was your first time playing Trails, wasn't it?
It was, and I would love to say it turned me into a lifelong fan, but at the time, it actually turned me off the series for a good chunk of time. Trying to play the first Trails in the Sky, the PSP version, on a time crunch when I was also in college was not a great way to experience that game for the first time.
It's a pretty
Um,
terrible way of experiencing it, honestly, especially
honest,
that version. Yeah.
yeah, honestly, like I mean, no turbo button or anything like that. You just have to go with it. Um, but we made it through. I think that first experience was definitely a little rough, but the next episode after that was the Final Fantasy X episode, and that one we had a blast doing because I think at the time I wrote my first review for the site was the PS4 collection for Final Fantasy X, like right around that same time.
I had a weird angle on that one too because I went into that as a slight FF10 disdainer slash hater.
Right, I remember.
It's exaggerated a little bit. I mean, whenever I say I hate a video game, it's always performative and exaggeration. I mean, like even my Kingdom Hearts dislike was greatly exaggerated. But
I was to say we finally got you around on that this
yeah,
year.
that's true.
Exactly.
I am like frustratingly
Full circle.
I enjoyed Kingdom Hearts too. But and that was another podcast aided journey. But anyway, when I played FF10 for the first time in I don't know, '03 or '04, right when I got a PS2. Like I didn't like the lack of a world map. I thought it was sort of pretty, but didn't have a lot of substance. Look, I'm not saying my opinions were right, but there were parts of it I disliked, and I did finish it, but it was not a instant favorite. But when I replayed it for the podcast over a decade after first trying it, I just sort of appreciated the beauty of the game better and the snappiness of the combat better. And I still, don't love the characters of Titus or Seymour or several of those others. Basically, I got a newfound appreciation for FF10 by playing it for the podcast. That shaped my podcast ideas going forward. For the most part, I would sign up for episodes for games I was either really excited to talk about or haven't played in a long time or have never played before, because I valued that new experience more than a veteran experience. Because I mean, there's a zillion podcasts out there of people just talking about the same games from their childhood. And while that is comforting and interesting to a degree, that didn't interest me personally. But again, that attitude changed for me as well, because I mean, I actually regret not signing up for the FF Tactics episodes, which I passed for that reason, or the Symphony of the Night episode, um, which I passed in 2015, but then re-recorded with you, Alana, many years later.
Yeah,
As
fixed.
yeah, exactly, to right that wrong, because Symphony of the Night needs to be talked about.
Very true.
But anyway, there was some inner website drama in that first year. Steven was helping us with the early episodes, but he got really, really busy because I think he was still running Rhythm Encounter and started grad school around the same time. So he ended up sort of just ditching us after editing the first several episodes, and then Marcos took over editing, and Josh was still the main host and planner. Sometime during 2015. Jesse got a lot busier. I think he was for a while the head of news. Is that right, Peter?
He and I coded news for
That's
a
what it was.
while before he eventually left. But I know, I think he just because he was a lawyer, I think his practice really it took off a bit more. So he's had a lot of like
a
real
lawyer
life
working for RPG
responsibilities.
Fan. It's funny. It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't think he was the first lawyer to work for RPG Fans. Because they had someone with law expertise on Random Encounter years and years and years ago.
I mean, Caitlin's a lawyer too, so
that's true. Yeah. Yeah, so Jesse left sometime during 2016 because just his I think he got married, and his business was getting him busier and busier, so he left, but on good terms. Jesse's I always thought very highly of Jesse.
Yeah, he was a good dude.
Yeah, Davey, he was the first person in that original six to leave RPG Fan. He had a lot of arguments with management. He wanted to start streaming or doing more video content in like 2015, and would sort of complain and sulk and disappear and not answer emails when he didn't get his way. So sometime in late 2015, Davey ended up leaving the group, and so I'm not sure if he's in any episodes in 2016. Around that time, Marcos became the head of the music team, and he after Steven left, and he didn't have time to edit episodes as often anymore. So I basically went from zero audio editing experience to editing every episode of Retro Encounter in early 2016 sometime. And Marcos wasn't as involved in episodes anymore, but he was still an occasional guest and also a perfect human being, Marcos Gaspar. One of the loveliest people you will ever meet.
For real.
Steambot Chronicles 2, when?
Yeah.
Right?
Man.
Steambot Chronicles, his like little gift
if there's
folder.
ever a port or a sequel to Steambot Chronicles, I will drive to Connecticut and get
Hell, I might make an episode out of it just because.
Yeah.
Yeah. We love Marcos Gaspar here on Retro Encounter, and don't make any mistake about it. But so Jesse left the site. Davey left the site in late 2015, early 2016. Marcos was still with the site, but he stepped back a little bit to focus more on music. And Peter, I think when Jesse left, you were the head of news for RPG Fan for some years.
Yes, I was probably for quite some time.
But in that window, Josh was writing a lot fewer news posts, and I was writing a lot fewer music reviews. And sort of the podcast became a co-production of the two of us, where we would plan all the episodes together. He hosted almost all of them, and I edited almost all of them for most of 2016. But then Josh got a lot busier too. He would sometimes argue with people behind the scenes. Josh could be a little difficult to get along with. He and I actually got along very well, but even in college, I could fake it in front of frat boys for surprisingly long amounts of time. So he didn't get along with everyone, but he and I got along okay. But his job got a lot busier, and him and his wife were planning to start their own family at the end of 2016. So after running it together with him for about a year, Josh left the website in end of 2016, beginning of 2017. And so almost exactly 8 years ago, I took over as the sole showrunner of Retro Encounter in January of 2017. But scaling it back a little bit, that's how sort of I became the last one standing on Podcast Island of those original 6 founders. Alana, you joined the website. Was it late 2015 or
It was sort of late. I joined in August 2015, so definitely the second half. So Retro was already like running. I think you were in the middle of the last story or Terra Enigma, maybe.
Yeah, that would have been fall of 2015, I think.
Yeah. And like, I will be totally honest, I was not really on like aware of podcasts at all at that point. Like I joined the website like as a reviewer initially. Joined very much in the idea of like, oh, hey, I have an English degree now. Let me write. Let me do things. Let me do things that are interesting. And I sort of got like sucked into the podcast because I like started listening. I was like, I think you and I hit it off pretty quickly, Sollosi. And then like a bunch of people who were on those episodes were like very enthusiastic, and I joined around the same time as a couple of other regulars. So Rob Fenner, Chris Gebauer also joined around the same time I did.
I interviewed Rob and Chris to join the website.
Rob Steinman interviewed me, so that was a very interesting interview. But
Alana Hagues interviewed me.
Who's that? Yeah, I wasn't like initially like super interested in joining, but it was one of those things I kind of just got sucked into because like I didn't start recording podcast episodes until about 6 or 8 months after I joined. My first episode was Nia, which was April 2016.
Was that before? So the Final Fantasy VI episode we did together was after that?
We recorded it after that, yeah, but that went
Right.
up a lot later in the year as well. That was the first episode you and I recorded together, yeah.
That's why my memory is that way of it.
Yeah.
Because especially in 2016 when it was sort of just Josh and I really wanted to get as many different voices from RPG Fan on as we could. So I was always in those staff forums. I was always like, "Hey, this is the next episode. Anybody interested in joining?"
Yep.
And I think, I mean, I wasn't on those near episodes, but I think you mentioned you were playing Final Fantasy VI for the first time.
Yes,
and that's a game that I've loved for decades. Well, and even in 2016, it had been decades. So I like jumped at that comment, like, "Hey, want to record a podcast about it?" And we did, and it went quite well.
It did. It went pretty well, yeah. I wrote a feature about it as well, so it was like a mix of multiple different things, like re-experiencing like old RPGs and also like talking about Six and like the stuff that I didn't know. So yeah, the newer episodes were unusual. I remember like my computer crashed like right before that episode, so I very vividly remember having this like panic as I was trying to like get my microphone to work and get Skype to work, which is what we used back in like 2016. Remember Skype, everyone? And it was like
the Dark Ages.
Oh yeah, you were on this episode as well, weren't you, Peter? I think it was
For
you.
Nier, yeah, I was. Yeah.
You, Chris, and Josh, and myself. And yeah, like definitely early days, but you could tell the podcast was in its rhythm at that point. But yeah, like from that point on, I was just like, I really want to talk about stuff. Like this is actually really fun. So yeah, I kind of got swept up in it, and like various times I was on like 4 episodes or 5 episodes in a row, and other times like you wouldn't find me for ages because I was just like either overwhelmed or going through things or doing different things. But yeah, I sort of accidentally became a mainstream voice in the show. I just kind of enjoyed hanging out with people and like talking to people online. So that was just a good way of doing it. So yeah, I kind of just stumbled into it really.
That really is one of the joys of podcasting. I don't think every podcast needs to be profound or needs to be super informative. For the most part, a podcast is people talking about a shared experience, whether the experience can be movies or sports or general news or video games or anything. And I think that's part of why I went to podcasting pretty early. I mean, I recorded my first podcast with my university games club in 2006. to give you an idea of how long I've been listening to various shows. And I started listening hardcore after I graduated from college in 2009. That's right, I'm an old man. But
2007, buddy.
But even if I go to the movies with friends and we see a movie and we have a nice time, I love going to the movies, and that's a fun part of the experience. But another part of the experience is going and getting ice cream or something afterwards and just talking about what we just saw and hanging out as, friends that had just shared an experience. And that's what podcasting is to me. Like, just people that are hanging out, talking about a shared experience. Maybe there's some structure to the show, maybe there isn't. And a good podcaster is not necessarily the most the smartest person or the most eloquent person or even the most charming person. It's just someone who's a good hang. Because video games are sort of my main hobby, and I love the sort of act of talking about shared experiences. Video game podcasts were sort of a natural fit for me, and I really, really loved meeting people and talking to them about games in this manner. But continuing the story on a little bit, I remember those Nier episodes. I think Marcos edited them.
He did, yes, because
yeah.
I spoiled the ending of Xenoblade Chronicles X on them.
Oh,
and
wow.
he was like not happy about it because he hadn't finished it. And I was like, well, dude, the game's no, actually it was pretty new at that point, so I could understand, but I didn't really think anything of it at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't bother me because, again, I am the least spoiler conscious person
Right.
of anyone that I know. My sister and I roll our eyes at people that gatekeep spoilers.
Yeah,
but when she was writing for Film Independent, because my sister's is involved in movie criticism, she actually got threats at one point for putting too many spoilers in a preview article. Following it was following Sundance, I think. So yeah, I don't have
following a Sundance movie. Come on.
She watched the movie at Sundance and previewed it, and then she got threats because she revealed too many spoilers in the
That's
article.
ridiculous. Also, your sister's a brilliant writer, but that's non sequitur.
Yeah, she's actually in grad school at Columbia now for fiction writing. So she's my sister is much smarter and more hardworking and prettier than I am.
I'm prettier, at least.
I mean, that's the least debatable of the three. But in 2017 is when I became the sole showrunner, and in a few months earlier, I think in like middle of 2016, we've switched to a weekly format because sometimes it was bi-weekly, sometimes it was 3 a month. It was pretty uneven. But Josh and I had a discussion. Hey, I mean, if you want to build an audience, consistency is so important. So we should either stick to every other week or go weekly and see if we can make this podcast grow a lot. Yeah. And we chose weekly, and it mostly worked. And I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn a little bit, but Retro Encounter has more listeners per episode than Random or Rhythm Encounter. And I don't think it's because the content isn't necessarily better. It's just because it's consistent and week to week, people are more likely to subscribe. And it has about as many episodes as both combined, but per episode there's still more for Retro Encounter. But in 2017, I was recording. I was hosting almost every episode and editing almost every episode. We did have editors come and help us occasionally. Brian Ingemanson was the co-editor with me for several years. One of my great regrets on the podcast actually is that Brian never got to be on an episode himself. We had him write in with comments twice, I think, for one of the quiz shows and one other time. But Brian was a very nice guy and helped with it so much. I really wish we had done an episode with him. But for the most part, like in 2017, we had this format. We would do 2 episodes a week on a specific game of the month. 2 episodes a month on the game of the month. And the intervening episodes would be one whatever we wanted. We experimented around a little bit. We started doing the current events episodes every year at the end of 2015. We just recorded the 2024 year in review episode. We've done 10 of those in a row, which is still wild to me. And I even did a very sort of meta set of episodes that were based on other podcasts. I think that was 2017, but it might have been 2018. We did one villains episode based on the Ashay Serrano podcast, and one quiz show episode based on an NPR podcast that I like. And those quiz shows, we ended up doing 6 of them, over roughly one a year for like over the course of about 8 years. And those ended up being really popular. Going forward, uh, that's kind of how it was, almost uninterrupted for 8 years. I did take a couple long breaks. I got really burnt out in the middle of the pandemic in 2022 and took about 4 or 5 months off. And then last year in 2023, or I should say 2 years ago now, I got very, very sick. I was hospitalized for several days. And took another 6 months off to sort of take care of my health a little bit. And Zach, you were the podcast did go on a long break in 2022, but you took over and ran the show for a while in 2023 when I was off.
That's true. Yeah.
But really, what changed about the show is we have an almost endless pool of games to cover, and RPG Fan would have staff come and go that became regulars on the podcast. I mean, just looking at other people that are very high on the how many episodes they've been on. I think Steph Sabidlo joined around the same time you did, Alana.
Yes, she joined exactly the same time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so second half of 2015. Hillary Andriff joined a little bit after you, and she was became a regular guest. Actually, this is sort of I think this is an underrated cute moment on the podcast. A long time ago, we recorded some Okami episodes, and it was me, Hillary, and Caitlin. And I had recorded episodes with them before, but never at the same time. Hillary and Caitlin were the two lead copy editors
That's true, yeah.
on the site at that point. And Caitlin has scaled back a little bit, but that's still Hillary's role. They had never met or spoken before, so they had a rather adorable, "Oh my god, it's so nice to finally talk to you," like right before we recorded. And when I realized what was going on, I mean, you could practically see the hearts in my eyes. It was great.
That's totally on brand for both those
Yeah.
people as well. Yeah, like having spoken and met both of them a few times, like yeah.
It went exactly how you're imagining it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but even just like giving RPG Fan staff a shared thing to engage in and talk to each other on was something I valued a lot, because otherwise it was very easy for us each to be just faceless and voiceless text in chat rooms and forums. Because I mean, other than the podcast and occasional video chats we do, that's basically how we only interact. The last several years has been Slack and Discord, but yeah, like I sort of like podcasting with new people so I can attach a voice or sometimes even an accent to the name. But another important thing happened in 2018. There was another hiring drive, and I think that's when you joined the website. Isn't that right, Zach? And like towards the end of 2018?
Yeah, October 2018. Yeah.
How upset were you that we recorded the Suikoden 2 episodes about a month before you joined?
Look, dude, I was applying around that time, and I, for the record, like, and I'll go into this in a minute, I suppose, it never occurred to me that I would even be invited onto an episode when I applied, because I was just like, oh, I'm just doing this on a lark. Like you, I had applied in when I was a student with a review that is published on GameFAQs now. I won't tell you what it is, though. And yeah, I was like, come on, y'all. But yeah, it was October 2018.
Right. I don't remember exactly what your first episode was, Zach. Do you remember what the subject was and around when it was?
It was Dragon Quest 11, spoiler cast, maybe November.
Oh yeah, that would have been right at the end of 2018. Yeah.
Yeah, because there was a rule at the time that like you couldn't join a podcast for like your first 3 months, because we had some people who had joined, I think, and they just podcasted and didn't do anything else, which, you know, is troubling. But it's interesting because like I had been a fan of RPG Fans since LunarNet, probably longer than some of you have been alive. But I'd been a fan for a long time, but I was never like the kind of person who listened to podcasts. Like it's never been who I was. It never was who I was. And I don't know, in like 2015, 2016, I was following RPG Fan, and I was like, oh, talking about these games that I love. Like I gotta go listen to these. And some of the early episodes, sometimes some of the combativeness turned me off. But
we'll get into that.
Yeah, as sort of the decade progressed, I was listening to just like these these wonderful conversations between the three of you and Steph, and Chris Gebauer. I always thought was great.
Oh
And
yeah, Chris was the best.
yeah, and so like I was like, man, these like because you have to understand, like, to me, like these were all like names on a website. Like, to me, like Mike Salbato or like Damian Thomas were like these like rock star, all star, like people who like I would never interact with. And so when I applied, like a big part of the reason why was that I had listened to Retro Encounter for a while, and Retro Encounter, from you, Sollosi, in particular, was just like such a fun experience to listen to, and the way that you ran them, I thought was fabulous, and the panelists were great. And it made me feel comfortable, and it made me feel comfortable to apply. And I was sort of like in a particular moment in my life where like I needed to do something that was like new and like that I was good at, or at least try something. You know what I mean? Like, and so I applied to be a reviewer because I'm an English teacher, so I like to write. But like I always knew when I applied, like I wanted to try to be on Retro Encounter. And I remember the first day in Slack, I said to you, like, I'm a big Retro Encounter fan, but I also like Kingdom Hearts. And you were like, one strike for, one strike against, or something like that.
Sounds about right.
And it was really funny. And Alana interviewed me, and it was like, whoa, what is this voice that I've heard on the radio for years now? So it was it's crazy to sort of think about where I am now, having met, I haven't met Peter, but I've talked to him enough that I feel like I have. And obviously,
So, yeah, right.
Obviously I've met Alana many times, and since we're married, and obviously I've met you a number of times, Sollosi. So yeah, it's sort of crazy. But yeah, after that, I think I was in the Kingdom Hearts 3 episode with Peter and Alana, and then I just sort of became a regular after that.
You had like a run of spoiler casts, didn't you? And then I think, was it Lufia 2? Was that
Lufia
your first
2,
game journal? Yeah.
Hosted by Leona McCallum, also
I
a
miss
Retro Encounter
Leona.
All-Star, Hall of Fame.
Oh, absolutely in the Retro Encounter Hall of Fame. We love Leona.
Yeah.
Leona's keeping very busy. She's not part of RPG fan staff anymore, but she's running her own Discord. She's been working on her own game in development. She streams regularly. She has her own community, but and I'm a little bit disappointed that I don't podcast with her anymore, but but whatever. Leona's wonderful, and there's again no Leona disrespect on the podcast. Leona and Marcos might be at the top of the list of RPG fan staff that I have not met but really want to. Because again, another way that RPG fan staff interact often is we would go to E3 every year, send a contingent of, I don't know, between 8 and 15 people. Sometimes it got a little out of hand, and I met, almost everybody on the show that I've talked to several times, other than Josh and Marcos and Leona. But those E3 trips are really valuable, and I met you and Steph at the same time, Peter, I think it was the 2016 E3.
Yeah. No, that was a great experience. I was a little starstruck meeting Rob and Derek and everybody for the first time, but it was great, really great getting to put faces to voices.
And then I think, Alana, I met you for the first time in 2018 E3.
You did, yeah. 2018 was my first time in America as well, so it was like totally overwhelming. I was like, what the hell? Yeah.
And then, Zach, I met you at 2019 in E3, and you, Alana, Steph, and I even went out and got like breakfast one morning before everyone else had arrived.
We played Jenga too.
Yeah, we played joint Jenga.
We played Jenga at this like LA coffee and donuts place or something.
Yeah, it was fun.
And it's a really nice time. But yeah, really, maybe my biggest takeaway of the podcast is I got to meet and talk to so many lovely people that I feel I will be lifelong friends with many of them. And so that's a big thing. Like Retro Encounter would not go as long as it did or be as moderately successful as it was without the people, because the panels and the discussions have been almost always really great. And it happens sometimes, but whenever someone tells me, it's usually on social media, but it can be in different settings, that they're a listener or that they've heard me for hundreds of hours or something, it always seems a little surreal. Like a lot of the time I feel like, especially when I'm like editing in my bedroom late at night, and the podcast has to post at 8 a.m. in the morning or something, I'm like, man, no one listens to this shit. I'm just the frog at the bottom of the well, not aware
I
of anything around us.
I promise you, pre meeting you guys, like you were all like celebrities to me. Like it was
That's
like
bonkers to me.
because to me, like it was just like a podcast that was on the feed, right? Like it would have been like any other podcast. Like it could have been like from, I don't know, MBR or whatever. And to me, it was like from RPG Fan, which I know like is not like, you know, big in the game sphere for a lot of people, but for me, it always was. So like it, yeah, people listened. I listened. I still do, obviously.
Two of the more surreal ones I remember are at E3 in, oh shoot, I think he visited us 3 years in a row at E3 from 2016 to 2018. But listener Mike Wooten just hung out with us
Oh,
because
he was there in 2019
oh
too.
yeah, he just hung out
Yeah.
with us at something like 3 years out of 4 that I went to E3. Just hanging out with us. He knew us from podcasts. He told us so, and he even was just unloading a bunch of things from his house and gave me his Avatar: The Last Airbender DVD.
I have some excellent near books from him.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Mike, for
Yeah, exactly.
for a cartoon that I ended up loving. So that's a positive, and very handsome man, Mike Wooten, by the way.
True story.
And a few years after that, I think it was 2019. But a listener emailed me saying, "Hey, I do stained glass works as a hobby. Would you like a stained glass ornament in as one of your favorite characters?" And I'm like, "Really? Like
Yes.
like you'll make me a stained glass thing?" And he said, "Oh yeah, sure. It'll be about this dimensions, and just give me a character from one of your favorite games, and I'll send it to you in a month or two." So yeah, I have a Sylvando from Dragon Quest XI stained
remember
glass
this.
decoration that's in the basement, well out of reach of my cats.
I was gonna
So
say, God.
yeah, so it's surreal when anyone tells me that they are a podcast listener. Even more surreal when I have actual interactions with them, and somehow even more surreal when they like people join the website as staff saying they got into the website because of the podcasts. And just off the top of my head, I know that's true for Eva Padilla and Gio Castillo, and probably definitely others that I'm forgetting. But it's a recurring thing. It's like, oh yeah, I listened to your podcast, and then I found out there was a website too. It's like, well, really? Okay, that's weird, because it is still a
Rob
shock.
White, Clayton Stevenson,
I was gonna say.
some newcomers too.
I was
That's
gonna say
true,
it's
right?
mostly people from like 2018-19 onwards. Like as the show has grown and grown and grown, like you were saying, like the more consistent it was, like the more people listened to it, and the more people found RPG Fan through it. So that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, and I mean, we mentioned this a little bit earlier. Josh sometimes had a bit of a combative or even negative tone on the show, and when I was on shows with him, I would usually try to steer it towards either continuing the discussion or like do the old positive negative sandwich, like, or the compliment sandwich, where you say a nice thing and balance it out with a negative thing, so that the criticism feels like it's coming from a more positive place. But I remember people specifically telling me that we were too much of a downer for like the first year of the show. So I tried to make it, even when I was critical, I tried to make it at least a little bit more from a place of enthusiasm than just determined to shit on a game from the first moment.
He definitely liked to push people's buttons a little bit. That was for sure.
Yeah, again, he didn't get along with everyone on the site, but he and I always got along okay, and I think we were able to keep the show going together for over a year doing it that way. Maybe going a little bit more behind the scenes, listeners, maybe you remember that every episode of 50 we come up with a poll of games to pick, of a game we'll play on a future episode of the show, and the poll goes public, and then it becomes an episode in several months. And the first thing is, the reason it takes several months after is because we pick shows, topics for shows very far in advance, usually at least 2 months or closer to 3 months, because I just want as much time as possible for people to, make sure they have a schedule. If we're playing a long game that they should play ahead of time, they have as much time as possible. I don't want to throw together a podcast at the last minute most of the time, even though it does happen sometimes. So if you don't be shocked if, like, I don't know the exact numbers on this, but like the episode 400 poll is in January, but that episode doesn't come to fruition until April or May. That's just how far ahead we plan these things. And also, I mean, you only maybe know the public polls that we do once or twice a year, but really we do a poll like that every month. About 3 months in advance, I hold an internal RPG fan staff only poll, like, hey, which of these games do we want to play for an episode later this year, or which of these subjects do we like the most? And there's a lot of I ultimately do pick a lot of the episode topics, especially the non-journal ones, but I would hold at least one poll a month for every single month that I was the showrunner of the podcast. So maybe not 12 months a year, but I mean, all three of you have voted in probably dozens of polls over the years.
I'd say that like, occasionally, like Dragon Quest 3, like you picked, right? Like it makes sense. But like for the most part, like it's the staff that makes the choice, and I think it's a good way of involving people. It's one of the things that is special about the way that you run this show.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite memories is like when we were at E3 and the collection of mana was announced. You were just like, right, I'm vetoing next month. It's like it's Seiken Densetsu 3. It's Trials of Mana. You were just like, nope, we're not doing. The poll is going back a month, and I think, yeah, that was a good choice.
I normally was able to play it cool with reveals and stuff at E3. I was trying to to appear classy and not do too much jumping up and down excited when something cool would happen. But the two times where I threw it out the window were the 2017 trailer for Monster Hunter World and the 2019 trailer for Trials of Mana and the Mana Collection. I just was like bewildered, laughing, tears in my eyes, unsure what to do. I was so mad I didn't have my Switch in that 2019 trip because I could have downloaded the Mana Collection right there. I think I brought my Vita instead. What the hell Vita means?
I brought my
3DS.
Ass. It was stupid. Yeah.
Hey, E3 is incredible for 3DS Street Passes.
Pass, yes.
Yeah, I have half of like the Japanese prefectures on my 3DS just because of E3 and Magfest. But yeah, no, I did call an audible for Trials of Mana, and that has happened in the past. But typically, I would do at least like 8 to 10 polls per year internally, sometimes more if I was doing a layered poll or something. But yeah, so listeners, you don't just get the one poll for a year from us. The reason I didn't do that every single month was because I wanted some control over what we were doing. Like if I didn't trust a giant voting public to not make me play Beyond the Beyond or something one month. And that's the same reason we don't do callers from outside. Like I figured if it was only RPG fan staff or invited guests, there was a level of trust that we could have in a in a panel, and not like I distrust listeners. It's just the more you open it up to the public like that, the more likely something random or unexpected or negative could happen. So yeah, I really kept it insular to RPG fan staff. Even some of my personal friends who have asked, hey man, I could do an episode with you on this sometime. It's like, nah man, I gotta keep it to RPG fan staff, because if I break that rule, then I have to open it up to everybody, and I don't want that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and I think we will submit some games for a poll at the end of this episode as well. But we'll see where we land on that. But yeah, that's enough behind the scenes and historical stuff. Each of us has been on many episodes. I think all of us are in the 100 club or close to it. No, I think we're all definitely in the 100 club. But does anyone have a particularly memorable or favorite episode that they look back on fondly? Because I mean, I've done so many, it would be a real struggle for me to pick any one. But I'll do my best. Does anyone else want to go first?
I'm gonna pick 3. I don't care. I'm gonna start exercising host rights here. The one before I joined, and it's not just because I love the game. It's because the panel and the enthusiasm was phenomenal. And that's Suikoden 2. Like, seriously, like Suikoden 2.
Screw you. That's one of my picks.
Sorry.
I think I was leaning towards picking that one as well.
Yeah. Suikoden 2 is a masterful game. Obviously, I think so. But, like, the way you guys talked about it and the enthusiasm. And, like, I remember at the end of the first episode, Sollosi, you said something like, and I haven't listened to this for years. You said something like, 5 things I don't like now, and let me know if they're going to be better in the second half. Like, it was just like such a good hook. And like Leona was in this episode. Obviously Alana was in this episode. It was the panel was so great. And to talk about a game that many of you hadn't played before. And it's like, for me, like, it was just like, we've gotten positive reviews on like Apple for that episode. And there's a reason for it, because it's a masterpiece.
For the first few for the first few years of the podcast, that was the most requested game for the episode.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know what everyone was thinking at the beginning of 2015, but I remember through 2016 and 2017, people wanted Suikoden 1 and 2 episodes. And that had been seriously been a bit of a white whale for me, because like I knew of them, of course. They were always expensive. I rented Suikoden 1 once and struggled at the beginning, and then just sort of wrote it off. But then when they became available on PSN in 2018 or maybe 2017, I bought both of them and decided, maybe this will be finally the year I get to play them. And I really was blown away by Suikoden 2 when I first played it. And the panel was good, the discussion was good. I got to bust out a terrible Sesame Street impression.
Oh yeah,
my
I forgot about
God,
that.
it's
We got
so
the Neck
legendary.
Lord. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so good.
But
Yeah.
I can't impersonate or do accents at all, other than a few Muppets. That's all I got.
That's all you need.
But
It was
that
fabulous.
was a great episode for me as well.
Yeah, it was just great to listen to, especially right before joining. Like, it was excellent. In terms of panels I was on, Mother 3 is up there. Sorry. It was just like,
you took another one of Alana's again.
yeah,
Yeah.
we didn't talk about this all beforehand.
No.
I just think that, like, the panel there, obviously, like, the four of us were all had good chemistry in terms of the panel, but like, Mother 3 is such a special game, and there's so many things to talk about, both from like a global economic perspective, but also from a very personal perspective. And I think that the way that the panel covered that, and the conversations that you, Sollosi, and you, Alana, and Eva, and I all had, I thought were really, really strong. And I really enjoyed that conversation. And to go to my last one, I'll pick one that I hosted, since that's going to be something that I'll be doing soon enough here. That's Persona 2 Innocent Sin.
He's literally stolen like all of them, like all three of them.
I would apologize if I was sorry. But Persona 2 Innocent Sin is a special game from a thematic perspective, and from a the different psychological concepts that it's touching on. And I'll admit, like, I'm an English teacher, right? So like, I love themes. I love to talk about characterization and theme and stuff like that. And that's sort of, if there is like a difference between the way you and I host, it's the way that I sort of sometimes kind of push the conversation for good or ill. And that game works for that. Like, there is so much thematic richness with that game, even though it sucks to play. It has one of the greatest stories ever told in an RPG, even though it is dressed in a just terrible gameplay. And so Persona 2 Innocent Sin was definitely my favorite hosting experience.
I mean, I could probably do this for an entire episode, but I won't. And maybe this is a little bit on brand for me. But one episode that I remember we did in early 2020 was the Yakuza 0 episode.
Oh yeah.
And that was sort of special to me. It was me, Jono, and we brought back Rob Steinman for a few episodes, because that was a game that Rob had been bugging me to play for a few years. And I developed a real friendship with Rob Steinman, and I see him. We usually would go to shows in New York once or twice a year, but we haven't done that in a little while, and I miss it, frankly. Call me Rob, call me Jackie. I went into Yakuza 0 with some interest, because I knew that these games had been around a while, and I'd heard good things said about them for a while. So I was interested to play it, but I didn't know it would kick off my most recent video game obsession. I was blown away by Yakuza 0. We talked about that period of Japanese history during the 80s economic boom. We talked about the differences in character between Kiryu and Majima, and they told me about things like events in Yakuza 4 and 5 that were foreshadowed in Yakuza 0, because Yakuza 0 came out between Yakuza 5 and 6, that I didn't understand at the time. It just made me more interested to try all of them. And then from 2020 to 2023, I would basically play 3 or 4 Yakuza games a year, spread out throughout the years, and it became my my pandemic companion series. Like, I really felt like I was vacationing in different parts of Japan when I was playing those games. And now Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth was probably my favorite video game of 2024, in spite of its very evident flaws, Zach. But and now I really feel like I put out some great episodes and connected with the Yakuza community and have a new game series in my list of favorites because of the podcast.
I went back and listened to those after I played Yakuza 0, and those are phenomenal episodes, and you guys get to like the core and the heart of that game perfectly. Excellent episodes.
I'm thinking of all the episodes that I've been on, and there's like maybe like a dozen I could probably choose from to be like some of my favorite ones. But I got to go with a couple relatively recent ones actually that I felt really good about were both Final Fantasy 13 and Kingdom Hearts 2. Obviously,
Hey.
Kingdom Hearts 2 was a big milestone, just personally, like coming back to the show after a little while and just being like, we'd had this running joke going about the Kingdom Hearts games and for pretty much since the show started, and so being able to finally get one off the list, play it and talk about it with you, Sollosi, and have kind of that positive experience shared was really enjoyable for me.
And that was actually really part 2 of a series, because we did some Kingdom Hearts 1 episodes.
We did, and you didn't like it back.
I still didn't
which is
like
fair.
it.
Which is fair.
My Kingdom Hearts story was I tried Kingdom Hearts 1 when I was in college, probably 05 or so, and I thought it was ridiculous and didn't finish the game. And then seeing Kingdom Hearts games come out over the decade with increasingly incomprehensible stories, I'm like, why the hell are people so into this nonsense? But then I finally like challenged my old demon and played Kingdom Hearts 1 again, and thought maybe a little better of it, but still didn't love it. But it really came to a head a few months ago, Peter, when you returned after a bit of a hiatus, and I found a Kingdom Hearts game that I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2 is a special game. It's very fun. And then the Final Fantasy 13 episode as well, revisiting that game after like a long time since it first came out, and finding a lot to love about it, a lot to discuss about it. I think we just had some great commentary on that title and its messy development, some of the things it succeeded in, some of the things it failed at. I think it was a very fair appraisal of one of the most divisive Final Fantasy titles, and I really enjoyed doing both of those episodes with you guys.
Now, I had barely touched FF13 at all because I had sort of avoided it by reputation, and I was not in danger of running out of games to play when it was new. But I remember when I finally played it with you guys, I thought the podcast was the right opportunity. I went in with a pretty open mind, and that game is not brilliant. It's very flawed, but it's flawed in interesting ways, and it made for a good discussion for sure.
Definitely did, and finding out how many different kinds of foul C there were in the world, or whatever.
That game is full of nonsense words, let me tell you.
It's really is.
Tales game and everything but name, really, isn't it? With like nonsense.
Honestly, though, that's a good way of describing it.
Yeah.
Tales games might be the kings of RPGs that introduce a vocabulary of made-up words for magic or the setting or people, or oh boy, like I love Tales of RPGs, and I've beaten something like 10 of them, but sometimes it's like, okay, the anime tropes are very evident here.
Mm-hmm. I can't in good conscience say this is one of my favorite episodes to be on, but I do want to give a special shout out to the first Essential 10 episode, which was
classic. It's a classic.
A classic. No, it is. It is very much a defining episode of Retro Encounter.
It is.
But oh my god, are we about ready to kill each other by the end of it?
I want to do an Essential 10 part 3.
Yeah. I think Essential 10 2 was a little friendlier, even though I was probably bullying people into some picks by the end of that episode. And I'm not proud of that, but at the end of that first recording for Essential 10 1 Part 2, I was really mad at everyone besides Marcos.
You can't be mad at Marcos.
It's impossible. If you're mad at Marcos, you need to examine thyself. Okay,
examine yourself in place.
You should start with the man in the mirror.
Okay, I have a couple, so I'll try and rattle them off really quickly. I'll do an early one first. Xenogears, which is one of the really early ones I was on. It was like my third game journal, I think. But I think about like that was when I really felt like I kind of understood what I wanted to get out of like Retro Encounter. It wasn't just like, oh, I'm playing a new game and this is really fun, but it was like trying to like weed out like the philosophy of things and like discuss that with people who are like-minded or sometimes not like-minded, right? Like you want to like hash out those opinions and see what other people think. And you learn things from other panelists, like both Caitlin and Rob Fenner had played it before. Josh was on the first episode, but he was sick, so he didn't come back for the second one. So it was really interesting to like play off of those two, who both knew it, and me, who was like it was like newcomer. And I just came out the other end. I was just like, well, this is like a top 5 game, and I think I probably still stand by that, even though I haven't played it since then.
Those are many of my favorite episodes where
Yeah.
if the panelists say 4 people and 2 of them have played it before and 2 of them are experiencing it for the first time,
Yeah.
and you can get both of those perspectives and multiple personalities bouncing off of it. Like I mean, sorry to jump ahead a little bit, but when we recorded Chrono Trigger episodes, it had blown my mind that not only had Chris Gebauer not played it before, which is fine. I mean, everyone has different experiences. He didn't even know the twist about Magus joining your party.
Yeah, I know,
And
right?
so for him to be surprised by that, I'm like, oh, this is a unicorn. This is great.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Another one was a game I mentioned earlier, Trials of Mana, which I love the Mana games, although I haven't played like many of them, but they're just like my thing, like aesthetically, visually, sound wise, everything. They are my thing. And Trials of Mana was really fun because like I like don't love talking about gameplay so much, but this was like a really good time to like flex that and have some fun with it. Like I played that game like 2.5 times for the podcast, which is like a never happens. I like reviewed it and then I played it again, and then I was halfway through like an all boys playthrough, I think, by the time we recorded the second episode. But it was just like so fun to like share different strategies and parties and like how it like linked with Secret of Mana and what changed, and just like the localization history as well. Like Greg, it was you, Greg, and Zach, and it was just a really fun time. I had a really good time with those.
Oh boy. I mean, I'm not sure how aware listeners are of this, but that really was sort of my signature favorite games for so long.
Uh-huh.
When I was getting into emulation for the first time in the early 2000s, like I heard there was a Secret of Mana 2, so I downloaded it in something like 01 or 02. And I've played it dozens of times. When the remake came out in 2020, I immediately beat it 3 times in a row to see each story path. I've done all girls run throughs, all boys run throughs, no healing run throughs. I wrote some of online forum guides for the class system in that game. That's one of those games that I know maybe a little too well, but it was so surreal seeing it get announced for the port and the remake at the same E3 presentation, and then play for it for a podcast like within a month or so after that. A total delight.
It was absolutely crazy, and I love that game to pieces. We've already like mentioned the quiz episodes, so the only other episode I want to really like shout out
is the one I won.
You won one, and then you still lost to me, so it's okay. But like a really stupid episode, and it came like very early in the pandemic, or right before, it might have been like right before it kicked off. Dragon Quest Your Story.
Oh god.
What an extremely specific episode. Wow. I remember because I was like
that was we did a movie episode that was inspired by one of my favorite podcasts, How Did This Get Made?
Yeah.
And that movie is so strange.
It's really weird. It's not very good. But it's a very specific memory in my like RPG fan history, because like I came back from like a really long break. That was like the first episode I did after a break. And then I just associate with the like, stupid Prince of Persia joke that you made, and I'm just like, right. There's like so many things that like live in my head from that era. Or I'm just, like, I think 2020 was like one of my most active years after taking such a long break. That I think episode 250 as well was that year. And sometimes I go back and listen to that episode as like a comfort episode, because I'm just like, this is like, we're rolling through mailbag episodes and like questions from readers and just having fun and taking the piss out of each other, basically, in some ways, like teasing each other. And it was just, the show is just like got very specific moments in time that I remember very fondly and feel like very big touchstones for me personally. So, yeah.
A favorite I want to call out is the time that Wes beat Alana in the quiz show.
I knew it was coming. As the minute I mentioned the quiz show, I was like, here he goes. This is the only thing he has over me. It's fine.
The quiz show episodes are ones I've listened to multiple times, because I mean, I just love quiz shows in general, whether they're audio or game shows or whatever. And like I'll listen to episodes of What's My Line from the 1950s, or I'll act like a British septuagenarian and watch episodes of Pointless on YouTube or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I miss Pointless. Moving to America, I'm like, God damn.
Yeah, I almost wish that I could have like spent a month in the UK or something just so I could decide whether I wanted to watch Pointless or The Chase on like in daytime TV. When in America, our version of that is like Family Feud or The Price is Right, which are fine TV shows, but Pointless and The Chase are both better. Zach, if you ever want to do a quiz show episode in the next year, maybe we can adapt The Chase and I'll be the chaser for you.
That sounds terrible, but also awesome.
Right.
Much of the audience does not understand. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I don't know if it's a good or a bad idea for me to be a contestant on a quiz show.
You're banned.
Right, I was gonna say, like, who's gonna beat you? Like,
yeah,
come
you're
on.
banned.
One person who loves quiz shows about as much as I do is my friend Diane, a wonderful human who I've known for alarmingly almost 30 years now. One time we were several of us were at a party and people decided to play Trivial Pursuit, and we divided into pairs, and Diane and I got to be a team. And there was a knowing exchange of glances, and we won on our second turn, I think.
What?
And then we were, because you just keep getting puzzle pie pieces until you get a question wrong, and we weren't allowed to play on the same team after that.
I was gonna say, that's like, yeah, no, you're banned. No way.
Yeah, that's like the least surprising thing I've heard today.
That was some knowledge and some luck. Like there was like, I mean, there are many scenarios where we wouldn't win on the second turn, but we got lucky.
Dude, you do weekly trivia with a 3-person team, if I'm not mistaken, and I've done weekly trivia with 8 to 9-person teams, and we lose to 3-person teams. I know who you are. You're not welcome.
we did win our league last year.
Yeah, exactly.
but we have guests now. Sometimes we even have as many as 5 people. But really, it's we even dressed up as Blood, Bath, and Beyond for Halloween last year. I'll show you the pictures if you haven't seen them yet.
Amazing.
I want to see them.
But I love quiz shows. I love podcasts, and I got to host 6 podcast quiz shows, and I had a really good time doing them. They do take a lot more work than most episodes because for each of them I have to write between 40 and 60 questions depending on the format. But they always went over well, and listeners responded to those positively. They get more email comments and YouTube comments than other episodes do.
I responded to the one that I won well.
Only took you 4 goes though.
Shut up.
I've auditioned for Jeopardy I think 3 times and still haven't made it on.
Wow.
But my trivia partner Diane, she did do an episode of Jeopardy, and she lost at the final Jeopardy question.
Oh man.
Yeah. I don't bring it up with her just because
even getting there is amazingly difficult. So well done.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I'm not doing this job anymore, but for several years I would do water and sewer inspections for my work. Now I have a desk job, but I had a dream of going on Jeopardy and doing the interview halfway through round 1 with Alex Trebek and just doing manhole puns for like a solid minute and see how uncomfortable I could make him.
That's like the most on-brand thing you could say about yourself. That's amazing.
But no, for many years I was a manhole inspector. Now I'm more of a manhole analyst. But it's my career has evolved along with my podcast career. There's not a lot of overlap between working for a government public works department and writing or talking about video games. So the podcast has been a creative outlet for me as much as any writing I've done for RPG Fan has. Although I mean, I conservatively write 3 things on the website per year.
I hear that number's about to go up though, buddy.
That's true. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. You write final thoughts like almost every month, so
that's true. I would write final thoughts at least,
and they're always the easiest to edit of all the final thoughts. So
that's kind of you.
It's also true.
I've only written something like 7 or 8 reviews over the course of my 10 years being with RPG Fan. But that number might go up sort of soon. Let's talk about the future of the podcast a little bit. I am stepping down as showrunner, and maybe you've gleaned by now that Zach is stepping up as showrunner. But there's going to be a few format changes. It's not going to be weekly anymore. It's going to be every other week because Zach is a busy man. You are a full-time educator, and you are also the head of the features department with RPG Fan. So I broke my brain occasionally trying to keep up a weekly schedule, and I don't have those other obligations. Although I do have a 9 to 5 job. So we're making the very reasonable decision to move it to bi-weekly instead of weekly.
That's true.
And secondly, I'm not leaving RPG Fan. I'm only stepping down as showrunner. So I'm going to be trying to write either either a solo feature or a short review, probably retro reviews, once a month or so. And I already have sort of lined up the first couple things I want to write. I will still use RPG Fan as a creative outlet, but it'll be less in podcasts and more in writing. But I'm not abandoning podcasts either. I mean, I probably won't be hosting many episodes anymore, but I will still be available as a guest. So I might appear on an occasional episode of Retro Encounter in 2025, but I just won't be planning and organizing and editing and hosting every single week, or most weeks. Because I mean, over the years, I made the very wise decision to take breaks and not host every episode because I would have burned out even faster doing that. But yeah, that's the vibe. I'm stepping down as showrunner. Zach is the new showrunner, but I'm still going to be around. And I think I'm actually signed up for a rhythm encounter episode in like a month or so. So my podcast retirement is not happening at all. It's just a let's say I'm not on the starting five anymore. I'm a backbencher. But yeah, I mean, thank you. Thank you, Alana. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Mike Salvato, for putting up with my occasionally dramatic ass over the years. Thank you, Rob and Derek and Steven, for being my podcast inspirations, for joining. Thank you, Josh, for co-founding the podcast with me and the others, and being my producing partner for about a year. Thank you, everyone that's ever been on the show. It's been a journey, but most of all, do not tell her I said this, because I don't think she would prefer I mention her. But thank you to Nikki, my girlfriend, who I've been dating for 2 years and met on the podcast 3 years ago. Cute. So even if nothing else happens from this podcast career other than my relationship with her, then it would still have been worth it. You can find her leaving me completely speechless with some Mega Man opinions on an episode of Random Encounter from before we were dating.
Yes, I remember this. That was like the episode I listened to that. I was like, oh, there's something here. I was like, there's a firecracker here. I'm like,
from the first episode she was on, which wasn't that episode, it was before then. I even messaged probably you, Alana, maybe also Mike. Hey, Nikki's really good on shows. We should get her on more podcast episodes. And yeah. I didn't realize it would lead to that. But yeah. When I discovered that she lived sort of close to me, I asked her out to lunch. And yeah, now I'm a stepdad to her cats. So and it's going great.
Yeah, adopting cats through like relationships of RPG Fan is like very good. Just speaking from like experience here.
Yeah, I mean, I was worried that her cats wouldn't like me before they moved in, but just a few hours ago we were playing. We were passing the controller playing Hades while one of them was purring on my lap, so it's going pretty well.
I've said this to you privately and publicly. Retro Encounter was my favorite podcast before I joined, and certainly it has been my favorite podcast since I joined. It's been a pleasure to be on episodes with you and to just, I don't know, become your friend, I guess. So it's been important to me. So I guess I'll say, like, going forward, as Sollosi said, it's going to be bi-weekly. Solosi's a machine. You can't understand how much pressure and time it is to have a full-time job and also to do this weekly. Like, it's a lot. Like, the scheduling people from like sometimes time zones that are literally the exact opposite of ours is extremely challenging. And Sollosi does it with grace. And there's no way I can keep up with the pace, but I will say this, like, going forward, the show is not going to change significantly in terms of its tone or its structure. We'll still do game journals, usually 2 games per game journal, and then some off topics here and there on a bi-weekly basis. So obviously we're not going to be doing it every month. And I obviously appreciate the audience that Sollosi has built at this point to allow us to go bi-weekly, because it's just not, it's not reasonable for me to do it any other way. But, you know, I, I'm still, you know, it's still going to be, from a baseline perspective, Solosi's podcast. I'm not changing the format or the structure or what it is from what he's created, because I suppose I have some talents, but like one of them is not creating what he's done. And I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not sure that I'll do any quiz shows because I'm not sure I could do it. I might ask him to come back to do one. But yeah, it's an honor to take it over. I can't. When I joined RPG Fan, if you had told me this is where I would be 6 years later, in many ways, I would have told you that you were high. And yet here I am. So anyway, the point is, like, Sollosi, you've done amazing work, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate you as an individual. You were there right after I got engaged to my wife. Like,
That's right. That was a really, really lovely weekend.
yeah. So thank you.
Like, my husband's in the other room right now, and I'm like, but everything Zach said, I will echo. Like, it's weird to think that, like, 9 years ago, 8 years ago, actually, 2015, 9 years ago. Oh my goodness, I'm not an RPG fan anymore, obviously, as a full timer, or this is the only thing I really do now. And really, that's mostly because of how important this show has become to me. Like, I would never have imagined jumping on a microphone and talking to sometimes complete strangers. Like, I would get, like, worked up before episodes, like, almost all the time. But, like, Sollosi's, you've become one of my best friends, and we still, like, text each other, like, every other day at least, with, like, stupid shit, or, like, oh, hey, look at this hot guy in Hades kind of thing. Like, just, like, really dumb stuff. But then other
Yeah,
times,
goddamn. Have you seen Dionysus and Hades too?
dude, I have Hades 2 in early access. You know, I've been in the bath with him. You know.
Whoa, Nelly.
But, like, yeah, this, like, there's, like, a crazy amount of things that have happened over the show over the years, and, like, for all the times we've both been frustrated, sometimes with each other, and sometimes, like, in general with things in life and other things, like, we've always messaged each other, and that show has, like, built up that friendship, and, like, friendships with many other people, including my now husband, which is really weird but really awesome. It's just, like, it's kind of wild to think of, like, how important a show it's become to me, and to, like, how much it's changed my, like, career and life trajectory. It's wild, and the fact that you've been doing it for, like, 8 years is, like, ridiculous, Lucy. Like, I know how tired you've gotten so many times. I know how hard it's been, but you've always, like, made the effort, and I think no one can ask any more than that, and for everything that you've put into it so far. So thank you. You deserve a break. I know you, though, and I know you will come crawling back at some point. I understand how you function and how you act. So yeah, I just thank you so much. And to Zach, who is, I think, in the other room still. You're gonna do an amazing job. I know you are, and I know how, like, worried you are about it. But you are going to do awesome, and I know who you are as a considerate person, and as a person who talks to people and who listens. So I know the exact kind of host you're going to be, and you're going to be amazing. And I put everything, my faith, into you, and we're always here for you.
Yeah, when I asked Zach to take over the podcast, I didn't really have a plan B. Zach was plans A through Q or so. Because there was, I mean, you've hosted many episodes, you've been an excellent panelist so many times, you know how the show works. You've been a dear friend to me for several years. You were by far the best candidate and my only choice for taking over. So Zach, I know you're going to be anxious and many other feelings when you record your first episodes as the new showrunner, but you're going to do an incredible job, and don't let anyone out in the world or internally tell you otherwise.
Thank you.
can't express enough to, like, again, following up on both of you guys and these beautiful sentiments. Yeah, Retro Encounter since the beginning has really been a tremendous positive force in my life. Ever since we started doing it together, and I've made some pretty incredible friends at RPG Fan, and especially you, Sollosi. You know, we've kept up for years, being able to do things like go to E3 together, and you know, we went the time we went out to Boston,
And found $100 in the motel bathroom
we found
fixture.
we found $200 cash in the world's sketchiest bathroom in our hotel. Um, yeah, don't want to think about that one in too many details. But and you've helped me out through like some of the darkest points in my life, and I know that you've worked incredibly hard at this podcast. You've paid your dues more than anyone I know, and I'm really happy for you to be getting the rest you deserve, and kind of looking back on this legacy you've left behind. And I know that Zach is one of the most intelligent and kind-hearted people that I know as well, and that the show is in the best possible hands. So yeah, I'm looking forward to listening and to this new chapter of Retro Encounter that's on its way.
Peter, my first E3 experience, I wasn't sure what to do. I had we had our schedules, but I emailed about 10 or so indie developers to see if they could fit in a last minute meeting, and the only one that responded was Supergiant. So my first E3 experience was you, Steph, and I playing a 2016 build of Pyre together.
Pyre on Greg Cassavin's laptop.
Yeah, it was Amir Rao and Greg Kasavin on one of their laptops in like a hall above one of the exhibition rooms, and I'm gonna remember that for as long as I live, because like I really felt like I was doing an industry thing and with like minded people, and I'm a fan of Supergiant to this day, and friends with you and Steph and you, Alana, and Zach, and it's all been a very special experience. And I mean, it's the people I've met, but also the work that I've done and the experiences I've had as with through this podcast and through RPG Fan are really special and even indelible to me now. And I'm just so grateful for all of it. But and the three of you were the panelists I wanted for this episode, because you all joined at different times, and I met you at in different ways and at different times. But like when I think of the Mount Rushmore of Retro Encounter guests, it's the three of you, and then I have to struggle to think of who's after. So thank you so much for so many wonderful episodes, and for agreeing to be here today for me. So yeah,
Of course.
thank you everyone.
Thanks for asking us here.
Yeah.
Happy to do it.
But I guess I should do housekeeping at least one last time. Maybe not the last time, but for the last time in a long while. Coming in 2 weeks, we're gonna do an episode on Final Fantasy IX, and 2 weeks after that, we'll do another episode on Final Fantasy IX, because we're moving to a bi-weekly format, but we're still gonna have mostly 2-episode game journals. I mean, exactly how the format evolves or to fit new schedule will be up to Zach, but 2 episodes on Final Fantasy IX. That game is excellent and beloved, and I'm sure it was not hard to assemble a panel for it, Zach. But that'll be
Nope, we got 5 real fast.
yeah, it'll be a killer pair of episodes coming later this month, and I don't think we have much planned beyond Final Fantasy IX, but Zach will very, very soon discover what planning a podcast schedule is like.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
But listeners, if you want to email us about the 10 years of the Retro Encounter podcast, or Final Fantasy IX, or what Zach should be playing in 2025, the best way to do so is to email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also follow RPG Fan on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Discord, always called either RPG Fan or RPG Fancom. Maybe the best place to go is to rpgfan.com, where we have daily reviews, articles, features, podcasts, and more. One of the best subpages on that site is rpgfan.com/shop, where we host 2 storefronts, one from TeePublic, where you can buy RPG fan apparel and accessories, and one hosted by our Hyperplay RPG, where you can buy the RPG fan reviews collection, a 300-page bound document of one-page RPG fan reviews from over the years. And speaking of podcasts, Retro Encounter is not the only podcast on RPG Fan, although sometimes I treat it like it is. There's also Random Encounter every other Monday about current events and what games we're playing, and Rhythm Encounter every other Monday about RPG music. You can listen to Retro, Random, or Rhythm Encounters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or whatever listening service you choose. We love feedback, especially if that feedback is 5 stars out of 5. But there's one thing we should do before we sign off with our social medias. So every episode that's a multiple of 50, we usually make a list of games we'd like to play for the podcast and then have the public vote on it. And I don't know exactly how the vote will be structured, but I think we should still, one last time, at least for me, for one last time in a while, put some names into the suggestion box. So each of us, while we sign off with our social media, tell Zach one game that we should play for Retro Encounter in 2025. And we'll have some version of a public poll to pick a winning game. But starting with you, Peter.
If you're looking for me on social media, you can always find me at I Have Fury on Blue Sky. And as for a game that I'm going to recommend, I think that we've underrepresented the Saga series on Retro Encounter. So I'm going to recommend Saga Frontier.
See, this is one of the good ones.
Did you think that underrepresentation might have been by design?
This is one of the good ones.
It's been long enough.
I've played Saga Frontier. I mean, like one of the routes, so like it was hard. So thanks.
Now, Alana, tell the listeners how they can find you and give Zach a game to play in 2025.
Okay, well, I'm on Blue Sky too. I am Alana Hagues on there. I also do a lot of writing and behind the scenes stuff at Nintendo Life, so come see me there if you want. I'm going to be even nastier than Peter, and I think Zach knows this because, like, true story, okay. So Zach just finished Fantasian, and I reviewed Fantasian, and I found it pretty hard. And Zach was like, one day he was like, you should play a real hard game like the 7th Saga. So I may have used something on the Steam Deck to download and play totally legally the 7th Saga for a little bit. And I was like, all right, I see why this is hard. It's also dull. So you can play the 7th Saga for Retro Encounter, Zach Wilkerson.
Look, Fantasian, easy game. Easy game.
Hey, the 7th Saga is challenging also because it's kind of busted.
And,
right, they jacked it up, didn't they, for the North American release?
The North American version jacked up the stats so that under some conditions, rival battles are almost impossible. Where one of them can heal itself to full MP and HP every other turn. I think under certain conditions you can't deal damage to the dwarf or the Tetsujin. It gets real weird. So good luck with that one, Zach.
I'm looking forward to it. It's a game that I've started at least 16 times and I've never finished, but I'm going to finish it this time.
I beat it once 15 plus years ago by holding down the tilde button on my laptop to make things go 8 times speed a lot. And whenever I had a good turn against a rival battle, I saved that state and reloaded it if I had to. But Zach, what's how can listeners find you, and what's a game that you think you would like to play for the podcast in 2025?
I guess soon enough, I'll be checking retro at rpgfan.com, which is sort of the Retro Encounter email address. But you can also find me personally, ZachW at rpgfan.com, or on our Discord as ZachW. And in terms of games, to sort of I guess continue the grindy, I don't really want to play it anymore theme that the last 2 panelists have put upon me. I will select Breath of Fire 2, which is, I don't know, a game that I really enjoyed a long time ago, and I'm not sure I would anymore, but I want to play it again.
I enjoyed that game 25 years ago, but I'm not sure I want to replay it because I remember it being frustrating then too.
Exactly. I think that's the theme here, right? Frustration.
All right, so I was gonna throw you a bone and give you something I thought you might enjoy, but maybe I can. Should I just join the frustration station here?
I think that's the goal here.
Oh,
All
that's the
right.
theme, yeah.
Well, let's see how you like this, Zach. For listeners, there are. It's not that hard to find me on the internet. I am at Evoker for Dogs on Blue Sky and Instagram and RPG Fans Discord. I'm still with RPG Fans, so if you email Sollosi at rpgfan.com, I would love to receive an email that is not from an ill-advised mailing list I signed up for E3 8 years ago, because that's most of what's trafficked there. Either that or online casinos trying to advertise on the site. But Zach, we did an episode, neither of us were on it, about Vanillaware games a few months ago, and that was a really interesting listen. And I'm not sure how much Vanillaware you've played, but I think
None.
one game that you would be, an interesting exercise for you would be to play Odin's Sphere for the
Oh my
podcast.
God.
I really want to play Odin's Sphere. This is
Yes.
excellent.
It's like the only Vanillaware game I haven't played, actually. So
I adore Muramas the Demon Blade and 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, but I think if Odin's Sphere wins the poll, maybe that would get me playing the game for perhaps the third attempt of my career.
interesting.
That is a good selection.
So we'll see what happens, whether it's Breath of Fire 2 or Odin's Sphere or Saga Frontier or the 7th Saga. That is a Retro Encounter episode later in 2025. But speaking of careers, this is not the end of my podcast career, but I am officially stepping down and helping Zach up the podium to step up. Listeners, for the last time in a while, thank you, good night, and good luck.